So now verses 23. Sorry, go for it.
Shri Bhaktivinod Thakur ki jai, Krishna Lila ki jai. Esha jivesha yorlila, Mayaya vartate dhuna. Ekta karma phalam bhukte cha para, Phaladayaka. Jiva Shakti Gata Satu Sandhini Satvarupini Sargadi Lokamarabhya Parkyam Srijati Swayam Karma Karma Phalam Dukham Sukham Bhatatra Vartate Papa punyadikam sarvamasha pasadikam hiyat Jiva shakti gata samvid Isha jnanam prakashayet Jnanena yena jivanam atmanyatma hilakshyate Vairagyamapi jivanam samvida sampravartati kadachilaya vanchatu prabara bhavati dhruvam Jiveya hryadini shakti Isha bhakti swarupini Maya nishedika sadhu nirakara parayana Chichaktirahati binatvad Isha bhakti kadhachana Na priti rupamapnoti sada shuka swabhavata Kritagyata bhavayukta Pratana vartate haru Samshrite pushti vanchava vairagya bhavanayuta Kadachita bhava bahuryada ashruva vartate drisho Tathapi na bhaved bhava Shri Krishne chit virasini Vibhinam shagata lila Krishnasya paratmatmana Jivanam badha bhutanam sambandhe vidyate kira Chitavila saratayetu Chichakti palita sada Nateshamatma yogena brahma jnanena vaparam Maya tu jarayoni tvacha Chidadharma parivartini Avaranatmika shakti risasya paricharika Chichakte patibimbatvan Mayaya binata kuta Pratichaya bhavedhina vastuno kakadachana Tasman maya krite vishwe Yad yad bhakti visheshata Tattadeva pratichaya chichakte jalachandravat Mayaya bimvitam sarvam prapancha sabhyate buddhai Jivasya bandhane shaktamishasya लीलाय सदा वस्तुना शुद्ध भावत्वं छायायां वर्तते कुत तस्मान् माया कृते विश्वे हेयत्वं परिदृश्यते सा माया सन्धिनी भूत्वा देशबुद्धिं तनोति आकृतौ विस्तृतौ व्याप्ता प्रपञ्चे वर्तते सदा जीवानां मर्त्यदेहादौ सर्वाणि करणानि च तिष्ठन्ति परिमेयानि भौतिकानि भावयहि संविदरूपा महामाया लिङ्गरूपविधायिनी अहङ्कारात्मकं चित्तं बध जीवेतनोत्यहो सशक्तिश्चेतसो बुद्धि इन्द्रिये बोधरूपिणी मनस्येव स्मृति शश्वद्विषयज्ञानदायिनी विषयज्ञानमेव स्यात् मायिकं नात्मधर्मकं प्रकृतिर्गुणसंयुक्तं प्रकृतं कथ्यते जनै समयाह्लादिनी प्रीति विषयेषु भवेत् किल कर्मानन्दस्वरूपा स भुक्ति भवप्रदायिनी याज्ञेश भजनं शाश्वत तत्प्रीतिकारकं भवेत् त्रिवर्गो विषयो धर्मो लक्षितस्तत्र कर्मिभिः हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे नित्य गौर हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल जय भक्तिविनोद ठाकुर जय भक्तिविनोद ठाकुर जय भक्तिविनोद ठाकुर जय भक्तिविनोद ठाकुर जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव जय जय गुरुदेव इतना गो प्रमांदी हरि हरि बोल ठाकुर की जय
Wow, well done. Congratulations, you finished another chapter of Bhaktivinod Thakur's songs. So well done. Thank you so much. Beautifully read, beautifully sung, Karuna. Madhusudan Prabhu, would you like to read?
Haribol? Wait a minute. Yeah, okay. Haribol, Hare Krishna.
It's long, okay?
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Let me get.
Make sure he puts his glasses on.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Right. Haribol. So it's from 33 onwards, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So those who consider the happiness of the Ladini aspect of the marginal potency as insignificant and consider the impersonal Brahman as incomplete, understand that the pastimes of Krishna with the spiritual potency of the superior energy are more relishable. So they join those pastimes. They are qualified for receiving the highest happiness They are servants of the Lord and are under the protection of the spiritual potency. They derive no fruits whatsoever from the impersonal knowledge of Brahman or yoga. In this context, yoga refers to devotional service, as described above in verses 28 to 31, as practiced by the living entities. Regarding impersonal knowledge of Brahman, please refer to verse 9 of this chapter. Therefore, when yogis and jnanis become fortunate, they engage in spiritual activities. After completing discussions on the marginal potency, I will now discuss the Sandhini, Samvit, and Ladini aspects of Maya Shakti, the external potency. All inert matter is manifested from the external potency of the superior energy. Therefore, this Maya potency converts spiritual characteristics into material characteristics. Maya, the external potency, covers the living entities. So she is the mother of illusion and a maidservant of the supersoul. After carefully studying the nature of Maya, it is concluded to be the most inferior potency in the whole creation, because all the living entities' inauspiciousness is created by Maya. If Maya did not exist, there would be no degradation of the living entities in the form of aversion to the Lord. Therefore, many people doubt whether Maya is the Lord's energy, because the Supreme Lord is all auspicious and unaffected by sin. Those who understand the Supreme Lord as the supreme doer and controller do not accept any truth that is contrary to him. They thus accept Maya as the material potency of the Supreme Lord's spiritual energy. The external potency, which is a reflection or shadow of the spiritual potency, is not independent. By the will of the Lord, Maya is the perverted reflection of, and therefore certainly subordinate to the Lord's spiritual potency. In this context, one should not accept the Mayavadi philosopher's meaning of bimba, reflection, pratibimba, which is a reflected image, and pratichaya, which is the shadow. If we consider the existence of Maya, we can conclude that this world is the shadow of Vaikuntha, which is created by the spiritual potency of the spirit energy of the Lord and is full of variegatedness. The example of the moon in water is applicable to this shadow, the material world. But this world is not false in the same way as the moon in the water is false. As Maya is in fact the potency of the superior energy, whatever is created by her is also a fact. As far as the work of the maidservant, Maya, is concerned, learned people say that this material world is her creation. This material existence is able to bind the living entity as part of the Lord's pastimes. So please see verse 22, 23 of this chapter. Just as the original pure condition of an object is not manifest in its shadow, we do not find the pleasantness of the spiritual world in the material world, which is created by Maya. Rather, we find the perverted quality, which is distress. When the external potency of the superior energy interacts with Sandhini, it spreads conception of nationalism. This mentality is found only in this world. The symptoms of this conception are spread through forms and their expansions. If one could ascertain Vaikuntha by one's thoughts, then the material forms and their expansions would certainly be useful. But the science of Vaikuntha is beyond the realm of material space, time, and argument, and is realized through samadhi. Actually, all the forms and expansions that are seen in Vaikuntha, the abode of transcendental pastimes, are all spiritual and auspicious. It should be known that the forms and expansions of the material world, the perverted reflection of the spiritual world, are forever devoid of bliss. The activities and bodies of the conditioned living entities are material and limited and are meant for performing work and enjoying the results. They are created by the Sandhini aspect of the external potency. One tries to understand word like tiny or atomic in description of the living entities and the greatness in description of the Supreme Lord in terms of material space, then one will not attain knowledge of the absolute truth. When the external potency of the spiritual energy interacts with Samvit, it creates a subtle body of the conditioned souls in the form of intelligence and false ego. The constitutional position of a pure living entity is beyond the gross and subtle bodies. The Samvit aspect of the external potency is known in the scriptures as nescience. Due to these nescience, the gross and the subtle bodies of the living entities are created. When pure living entities reside in Vaikuntha, the first knot of nescience in the form of false ego does not entangle them. Pure living entities cannot remain steady after giving up the spiritual activities. Therefore, as soon as the living entities become situated in their own happiness through the minute independence given by the Lord, they become shelterless and are compelled to take shelter of Maya. On account of this, pure living entities have no shelter other than Vaikuntha. The living entities of Vaikuntha are very insignificant, like fireflies in comparison to the powerful sun-like Lord. As soon as the Lord, living entity, leaves Vaikuntha, he is simultaneously awarded a subtle body and thrown into the material world created by Maya. All manifestations of the Sandhini, Samvit, and Hladini aspects of the marginal potency are mixed with Maya as soon as the living entity leaves the shelter of Vaikuntha. When absorption in this false ego is the function of the heart, when one considers material existence as his own, this is called false ego. Absorption in this false ego is the function of the heart. Cultivating material sense objects through the heart is the function of the mind, and the realization through this cultivation is called material knowledge. The mind, being superior to the senses, manifests as the functions of the senses in their association. When the impression of contact with the senses and the sense objects is established within, it is protected by the strength of remembrance. When one cultivates those protected memories by following the process of elaborating and condensing them, then whatever one conjectures is called argument. By this argument, knowledge of sense object and related items is acquired. The Samvit aspect of external energy creates the intelligence of the heart, the feelings of the senses, the remembrance of the mind, and the knowledge of sense objects. Knowledge of sense objects is completely mundane. It has nothing to do with one's constitutional duties. It is called material knowledge because it is connected with the qualities of the material world. Hladini aspect of the external energy manifests as attachment for material objects. That attachment spreads the conception of enjoyment in the form of happiness derived from fruitive activities. Attachment for the material world, the endeavor for material prosperity, the desire for sense gratification, all naturally arise from this attachment to sense objects. In order to maintain life peacefully, the four castes, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishyas, and Shudra, are established according to people's natural characteristics. And the four ashrams, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Brahmachari, and Sannyas, are established according to people's position. According to necessity, constitutional and conditional occupational duties are ascribed. When the upper and the lower planets, which are created by the Sandhini aspect of the material energy potency, see verses 24-25, are connected with the results of these duties, then they become the object of the fruity workers' hopes or fears. It is to be mentioned at this point that the Samvit and Hladini aspect of the material potency, being almost covered by the Samvit and Hladini aspects of the external energy, time to time manifest renunciation and knowledge of the self, which are ultimately overcome by Maya due to the absence of spiritual activities. The Supersoul is perceived at this point as Yagneshwar, the Lord of the sacrifice. People of the material world try to please him by these activities, and they worship him by sacrifices. The name of this religion is Trivargya, or Dharma, Artha, and Kama. But there is no possibility of moksha or liberation by this path. Yeah, well, that's a long reading.
Well done.
Yeah.
So good. This
Wow, I
is,
have to go through it again because it
yeah,
covers
a lot.
a lot
Like,
about Vaikuntha,
yeah.
living entities covered up with Maya. Oh, okay. Thank you. Haribo.
It's like a book in itself. Atraiva Sattva Vijnanam by Bhaktivinod Thakur in the Krishna's Samhita. And this is chapter 2, Bhagavac-chakti Varnanam. Bhaktivinod Thakur ki jai. So